They will remember the dragon. They will remember the sword, and the flame, and the breaking of the world. They will carve his name into the bones of mountains, and whisper it to children yet unborn. But I do not write for them. I write for the girl who once stood at the edge of the Winespring water, barefoot in the mud, watching the current carry fallen leaves toward a horizon she could not name. I write for her because she deserves to know what became of her longing. My name is Egwene Alver, daughter of Bran, daughter of the two rivers. Apprentice to the wisdom of Emond's field. Once, I believed that was the whole of me. A small thread, woven into a small pattern. In a small village the world had forgotten. The wheel had other designs. Tomorrow, the last battle begins. The sky above Tarmon Gai'don already bleeds with the shadow of the Dark One. I can feel him pressing against the pattern, a great and formless malice, testing the weave for the thread he might pull free. I can feel the Sisters of the White Tower sharpening their weaves like blades. I can feel the weight of the serpent and the staff resting upon my shoulders, heavier than any mountain, heavier than any oath. I will not see the dawn after. I know this. I have seen it in Tel'aran'rhiod, written in the shifting sands of the world of dreams. My thread runs to its end tomorrow, and I do not rage against it. I made my choice long ago, in a village that smelled of wood smoke and apple blossoms, when I stepped onto a ferry and did not look back. The pattern requires all threads, even the ones that must be cut. So tonight, while the horns of war sleep in their racks and the sisters keep their vigil, I will speak. Not as the Amyrlin seat, not as the mistress of the White Tower, not as the woman who united the Ajahs and marched upon Valon with fire in her heart. I will speak as Egwene, the girl who listened to the wind, the girl who wanted more than the world promised her, the girl who was afraid and went anyway. This is my thread, this is my weaving, and the wheel turns. There is a sound the Winespring water makes in the deep of winter, when the ice thins along the banks and the current speaks beneath it. A low, murmuring voice, patient and endless, as though the water has been telling the same story since the breaking of the world, and will continue long after the last voice falls silent. I grew up with that sound in my bones. Emond's field, two rivers, a place so small that cartographers forgot to mark it, so stubborn that the world's great wars passed it by like wind passing through wheat. We had no king there, no lord, only the village council, and the women's circle, and the wisdom, and the slow turning of seasons. Tobacco harvest, wool shearing, the first frost, the first thaw. Well, Tyne, the cycle repeated, year upon year, as though time itself had grown comfortable in our little valley and saw no reason to move on. My father, Bran Alver, sat at the head of the village council. He was a broad man, slow to speak and slower to anger, with hands like river stones and a voice that could quiet a room full of arguing farmers with a single raised palm. He loved me. I never doubted that. But he loved me in the way of men who believe the world is a fixed thing, a thing to be endured, a thing to be weathered. He wanted me safe. He wanted me rooted. He wanted me to marry, to bear children, to grow old within sight of the Winespring water, and to be buried beneath it. I wanted the world. I did not know that then, not truly. I only knew the wanting, a restlessness beneath my ribs, like a bird beating its wings against a cage it could not see. I would stand at the edge of the village and stare south, toward the White Bridge, toward the places where the roads went on and on into lands I had no name for, and I would feel something pulling at me, a thread taut and trembling attached to some distant loom I could not yet perceive. Nynaeve Almira was the wisdom of Emond's field, young for the role, barely older than me when I became her apprentice, but fierce, brilliant, and possessed of a tongue that could strip bark from an oak. She taught me herbs. Willow's bark for fever, comfrey for broken bones, tansy for the belly, and nettle for the blood. She taught me to listen to the body. to read the signs hidden beneath the skin. And she taught me, without meaning to, that knowledge was a kind of power, that to know the name of a thing was to hold a thread of it in your hand. But even Nynaeve's knowledge had its borders. Even she could not answer the questions that kept me awake at night. Why did the wind sometimes speak? Why did certain dreams feel less like dreams and more like windows opened onto rooms I had never entered? Why, on the coldest nights of winter, did I feel a warmth gathering at the base of my spine, a sweetness like the first taste of honey, as though something vast and luminous was pressing against the inside of my skin, waiting to be let in? I did not have words for it, not yet. And then came Beltane. I remember the morning with the clarity of a blade's edge. The village was already stirring, hung with lanterns and streamers of green and gold. The smell of baking bread and roasting meat filled the streets. Children darted between the legs of adults, screaming with delight. Men carried barrels of cider from the Winespring inn, while women arranged garlands of wildflowers along the green. And then the riders came, 2 figures on the road from the Terren, moving with a purpose that made the air around them seem to still. The first was a woman, dark-eyed and ageless in the way of Aes Sedai, wrapped in a cloak of blue so deep it seemed to drink the morning light. The second was a man, tall as a lance, with a sword at his hip and eyes like winter lakes. They moved through Emond's field as though they owned the ground beneath their horses' hooves, and the entire village went quiet, the way a forest goes quiet when a predator passes. Moiraine Damodred and Lan Mandragoran, her warder. I watched them from the doorway of the Winespring Inn, my hands still dusted with flour from helping my mother with the Beltane loaves, and I felt it, that pulling sensation, that trembling thread. Only this time, it was not pulling me toward some distant horizon. It was pulling me toward her, toward the woman in blue, as though she had reached across the whole of the world, found the single thread that was mine, and given it the gentlest of tugs. That night, the Trollocs came. I will not describe them in full. No telling does them justice. They were wrong. Wrong in their shapes, wrong in their sounds, wrong in the smell of them, which was the smell of old graves and older hatred. They poured out of the dark like a wound pouring blood, howling, burning, tearing through the farmsteads at the edge of the village with a savagery that made the mind recoil. I remember the heat. I remember the screaming. I remember my father's voice, steady even in the chaos, calling for the men to form a line. I remember Rand, pale and wild-eyed, pulling me behind the inn as a Trolloc, the size of a bull, crashed through the fence not 10 paces from where we stood. And I remember the fire, not the fire of the burning barns, not the fire of torches and oil, a fire inside me. A sudden, desperate, blinding need to do something, to be something, to reach for the one thing I had felt my whole life but never dared to touch. That warmth at the base of my spine, that sweetness, that vast and luminous presence, pressing, pressing, pressing. I reached, and the world answered. I do not remember what I wove. I do not remember the shape of it, or the words, or the gesture. I remember only the feeling, as though I had been drowning my entire life and had finally broken the surface, as though I had been deaf and heard, for the first time, the true sound of the world. The one power flooded through me, wild and sweet and terrible, and the Trolloc that had been lunging toward Rand stumbled, shrieked, and fell, struck by something I could not see but could feel, a lash of pure will made manifest through the source. And then I was on my knees, vomiting, shaking, the taste of copper on my tongue and stars bursting behind my eyes. And Moiraine was there, her hand on my shoulder, her dark eyes wide with something I could not name, not surprise, not fear, recognition. "You have the spark, child," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it cut through the chaos like a bell. "You have it, and it is strong, stronger than I dared hope." I looked at her. I looked at Rand, who was staring at me as though I had become someone else. I looked at the burning village, at my father rallying the men, at Nynaeve striding through the smoke with a bow in her hand and murder in her eyes. And I understood. The bird had found its cage, and the cage was made of everything I had ever loved. 2 days later, I left Emond's field. I stood on the bank of the Tarmon with a pack on my back, and the world stretching out before me, vast and terrifying and beautiful. My father did not come to see me off. He could not. He stood at the window of the Winespring Inn, watching, and I knew that was all he could bear. Nynaeve was there, her jaw tight, her eyes bright. She pressed a pouch of dried herbs into my hand and said nothing, because there was nothing to say. Ran was there too, his face a war of fear and wonder. He took my hand, and for a moment we were children again, standing in the mud by the Winespring water, watching the leaves drift south. Then I stepped onto the ferry, and I did not look back. The fever came that night. Moraine had warned me. The first touch of the source is not gentle. It is a drowning and a burning. It is the body learning to hold something it was never meant to contain. I lay in the bottom of the ferry, shaking, sweating, my teeth clenched so hard I tasted blood, and the one power moved through me in waves, each one larger than the last, each one threatening to tear me apart. I thought I would die. I wanted to die. The sweetness of it was too vast, too bright, too terrible to bear. It was like swallowing the sun and feeling it burn through every vein, every nerve, every thought. And yet, beneath the agony, beneath the terror, there was something else, something quiet, something that whispered in a voice like the Winespring water in winter, "You are not meant for small things." I held on to that whisper. I held on to it through the fever, through the pain, through the long, dark night on the river. I held on to it as the two rivers fell away behind me, as the world opened its vast and indifferent arms, as the thread of my life was pulled taut and cast into a pattern I could not yet see. I was 17 years old. I was afraid. I was burning. And I was finally, terribly, beautifully awake. Valon. Even now, after all the years, after all the blood and the politics and the weight of the serpent and the staff, the name still carries a sound like a struck bell, a resonance, a promise, a threat. I saw it first from the deck of a river barge. 3 weeks after leaving the two rivers, the city rose from the waters of the Erenin like a dream-made stone, gleaming white and gold in the afternoon sun. Bridges arched across the river like the ribs of some vast sleeping beast. Towers climbed toward the sky, slender and impossibly graceful, built by Ajah hands in an age when the world was young and the one power flowed as freely as rain. And at the center of it all, piercing the clouds, casting its shadow over every street and rooftop and prayer, stood the White Tower. I remember thinking it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen, and the most terrifying. Moraine brought us through the gates. Me and Nynaeve and Rand and Matt and Perrin, 5 children from a village the world had forgotten, walking into the heart of the world itself. The others would go their own paths, Rand to his destiny, Matt and Perrin to theirs. But Nynaeve and I, we were claimed by the tower, swallowed by it, digested, reshaped, and spat back out as something else. They dressed me in white, novice white, a plain dress, unadorned, the color of blank pages and unwritten futures. They took my name in a sense. I was no longer Egwene Ver, daughter of Bran, apprentice to the wisdom. I was a novice, one among hundreds, a single drop in an ocean of white, expected to learn, to obey, to be silent, and to forget that I had ever been anything else. The days were a grinding, dawn to dusk, and often past dusk, filled with labor and lesson in equal measure. I scrubbed floors until my knees bled. I polished silver until my fingers cramped into claws. I carried water, mended linens, tended the kitchens, and swept the corridors of the tower until I could navigate them blindfolded. And between the labor, the lessons, hours of them, history, philosophy, the nature of the one power, the laws of the tower, the 3 oaths, which we were not yet permitted to swear but were made to memorize until they lived in our sleep. Speak no word that is not true. Make no weapon with which one man may kill another. Use the one power only as a weapon against Shadowspawn. or in the last desperate defense of one's own life. 3 chains, forged in the age of legends, binding every Aes Sedai to a life of service and restraint. I recited them every morning. I recited them every night. And I wondered, in the quiet hours when the other novices slept and I lay awake staring at the ceiling, whether they were truly chains or whether they were the only things keeping the power from consuming us whole. Naive hated it, every moment of it. Every moment of it. The rules, the silence, the condescension of the sisters who looked at us as though we were half-formed things, barely worthy of the air in the tower. She raged against it like a storm against a cliff, and the cliff did not move. But I watched her. I watched her swallow her fury and channel it into her studies, into her weaves, into a determination so fierce it made the air around her crackle. She was accepted within a year, a speed unmatched in the tower's history, and I was proud of her, and terrified, because if she could rise that fast, what would they expect of me? Elaine Traken came to me in my 2nd year. The daughter heir of Andor, golden-haired and sharp-tongued, carrying the weight of a kingdom on her shoulders and wearing it like a crown she had not yet decided to accept. We were put together in lessons, in chores, in the small shared miseries of novice life, and something grew between us, not friendship at first, something more wary. 2 animals circling each other in a cage, testing, probing, waiting to see who would bare teeth first. Neither of us did, and slowly, the wariness became respect, and the respect became love. Not the love of sisters, though we were that. Not the love of soldiers, though we would become that. It was the love of 2 women who looked at the world and saw the same shape of it, who understood that power was not a gift, but a burden, and that the only way to bear it was to bear it together. It was Elaine who first told me about the Ajahs, the factions within the tower, each with its own philosophy, its own purpose, its own secret ambitions. The blue, who sought justice and the great causes of the world. The red, who hunted men who could channel, terrified of another breaking. The green, the battle Ajah, who prepared for Tarmon Gai'don with sword and weave. The yellow, healers. The brown, scholars. The white, philosophers. The gray, mediators. 7 paths. 7 ways of being Aes Sedai, and beneath them, like rot, beneath the roots of a great tree, the black Ajah, those who had sworn themselves not to the light, but to the dark, those who wore the face of sisters while serving the father of lies. I did not know their names then. I did not know that they walked the same corridors, sat in the same halls, smiled with the same mouths. I only knew that something was wrong. A wrongness in the air, a dissonance in the pattern, like a thread pulled too tight in a direction it was never meant to go. But I was a novice. I had no power, no voice, no right to question, and so I learned, and I waited. The test came in my 3rd year, the test for accepted. They brought me to a chamber deep in the heart of the tower, a room that smelled of incense and old stone and the faint metallic tang of the one power held in careful check. 3 arches stood in the center of the room, wrought of a silver-white metal I could not name. Tel'aran'rhiod, they told me, objects of power from the age of legends, built for purposes that the present age could not fully comprehend. 3 times you will enter, the mistress of novices told me. 3 times you will face what the arches show you. 3 times you will be offered the life you desire most, and 3 times you must choose to walk away from it. I nodded. I was 17. I thought I understood. I did not understand. The first arch showed me a life in Emond's field. I was the wisdom, as Nynaeve had been. I had a husband, a home, children with mud on their hands and laughter in their throats. The Winespring water murmured its endless song. The seasons turned. I grew old in peace, in safety, in the small and sacred ordinary of a life well lived. And it was beautiful. Light held me. It was beautiful. But I walked away. The 2nd arch showed me power. I was Aes Sedai, but more than that, I was Amyrlin. The serpent and the staff rested in my hands, and the nations bent before me. I shaped the world with a word. I commanded armies. I was feared, revered, absolute, and it was intoxicating, and it was hollow, and I walked away. The third arch showed me death, not a battle, not a sacrifice, just an ending. Why, final, a closing of eyes in a dark room, with no one beside me, no hand to hold, no voice to say my name, just the silence and the stopping of the heart and the thread snapping free from the loom. And I walked away, not because I was unafraid, but because I understood in that moment that the test was not about courage, it was about acceptance. The arches did not ask me to be fearless, they asked me to be willing. Willing to face any future, however terrible, however small, however vast, and to choose the path the pattern set before me, rather than the path my heart desired. I emerged from the third arch, shaking, weeping, my novice white drenched in sweat, and the mistress of novices looked at me, and for the first time in 3 years she smiled. "You are accepted," she said, and I put on the ring. The great serpent coiled around my finger, biting its own tail, an ending that was also a beginning that was also an ending. I was no longer a girl from the 2 rivers. I was Aes Sedai, or so I believed. But the tower was already fracturing. I could feel it in the silences between sisters, in the averted eyes, in the whispers that stopped when I entered a room. Xuan Sanchi, the Amyrlin, sat the serpent's throne with a strength that made the walls tremble. But even she could not hold the cracks together, not forever. Not against what was coming. And in the dark, in the spaces between the light, the black Ajah moved, patient, silent, weaving their threads into the pattern with hands that served the shadow. I did not yet know their names. I did not yet know how deep the rot had spread, but I felt it in my dreams, in the quiet hours when the tower slept and I lay awake, listening to the wind against the glass, feeling the one power hum in my veins like a plucked string. Something was coming, something vast and terrible and inevitable, and I was going to have to be more than Aes Sedai, more than accepted, more than a girl who had walked through 3 arches and come out the other side. I was going to have to become something the tower had not seen in 1,000 years. But that is a story for another telling. For now, I was still learning, still growing, still a single thread, feeling for the first time the vast and terrible tension of the loom. And the wheel turned, and the wheel wove, and I held fast. There is a world beneath the world, a world behind the world, a world that exists in the spaces between waking and sleeping, between thought and silence, between the drawing of a breath and the letting of it go. The Aiel call it Tel'aran'rhiod, the unseen world, the world of dreams, and it was there in that shifting, luminous, terrible place that I found the self the White Tower could not forge. I came to the Isle Waste in the wake of Ruodian, in the shadow of Rand's revelation, in the long burning days when the world seemed to tilt on its axis, and every certainty I had held crumbled like dry clay in the sun. The White Tower had sent me to serve, to observe, to report, but the wise ones had other plans. Amos found me first, a woman of middle years, with hair the color of burnished copper and eyes like pale amber, steady and unblinking as a hawk's. She did not greet me. She did not welcome me. She looked at me the way a potter looks at a lump of clay, assessing, calculating, deciding what shape to press into the formless thing. "Your dream," she said. Not a question, a statement, a diagnosis. "I dream," I answered. "Everyone dreams." No. Her voice was flat, final. "Not as you dream. Not as I dream. You walk in your sleep, girl. You have been walking for years, and you do not even know it." She was right. Of course she was right. I had always dreamed. Vivid, relentless, inescapable dreams that clung to me like cobwebs in the morning, that left me gasping and disoriented, that showed me things I could not name and places I had never been. I had told myself they were merely dreams, the residue of an overactive mind, the price of the spark, perhaps, the cost of carrying the one power in a body that was never meant to hold it. They were not merely dreams. Tel'aran'rhiod is not a place. I must be clear on this, because the mind resists the truth of it. It is not a country to be mapped, not a room to be entered, not a road to be walked. It is the reflection of all worlds, all possibilities, all thoughts, all fears, all desires, layered upon one another in an infinite palimpsest. In Tel'aran'rhiod, the White Tower stands as it stands in the waking world, but it also stands as it stood 1,000 years ago, and as it will stand 1,000 years hence. It stands burning. It stands whole. It stands empty. It stands overrun with shadow, all at once, all true, all false. And in Tel'aran'rhiod, thought is substance, a stray fear, a momentary doubt, a flash of anger, and the world reshapes itself around you. The floor becomes a pit, the sky becomes a mouth, the air becomes knives. You must master your mind, or the unseen world will master you. This is the first law. This is the only law that matters. The wise ones taught me. Amys, bear, with her sharp tongue and sharper eyes. Amyrlin, who laughed like a blade being drawn. Sorleia, ancient and implacable, who had walked the dream since before I was born, and would walk it long after I was dust. They did not teach me as the White Tower taught. There were no lessons, no lectures, no hours of rote memorization. They taught me by throwing me into the deep water and watching to see if I would swim or drown. Enter the dream, Amys would say, and do not touch anything. Do not reach for anything. Do not try to shape anything. Simply be. Simply see. Simply listen. And I would enter, through the Tel'aran'rhiod, that small twisted ring of bone and metal that hummed against my skin like a living thing. And I would step into Tel'aran'rhiod, and the world would explode into infinite possibility, and every instinct in me would scream to seize, to control, to weave, to make the dream obey my will, the way Sidar obeyed my hand. And every time, the dream would punish me. A wall would close in, the ground would shift. A nightmare would take shape, born from my own grasping need to dominate, and it would hunt me through corridors of impossible geometry until I woke gasping, soaked in sweat, my heart hammering against my ribs. You fight it, Amys said after one such night. She did not sound angry. She sounded tired. You fight the dream as though it were an enemy, as though it were a thing to be conquered. It is not. It is a river. You cannot command a river. You can only learn to float. I did not understand. Not then. The White Tower had taught me that the one power was a tool, a force to be directed, a weapon to be wielded. Channel, shape, release, control, control, control. Every lesson, every test, every moment of training had been about mastery, about dominance, about bending the world to your will through sheer force of intent. But Tel'aran'rhiod was not the one power. Tel'aran'rhiod was older than that, older than the tower, older than the Aiu, older perhaps than the wheel itself, and it did not yield to force. It yielded to surrender. It took me 3 months to learn, 3 months of failing, 3 months of being hunted by my own fears, my own ambitions, my own desperate need to be in control. 3 months of waking, with the taste of blood in my mouth and the sound of my own screaming still ringing in my ears. And then, one night, I stopped fighting. I entered the dream, and I let go. I released my grip on the world, released my need to shape it, released my fear of it. I simply stood in the shifting light of Tel'aran'rhiod, and I breathed, and I listened, and the dream opened to me like a flower. The walls became transparent. The sky became vast and clear and full of stars that were not stars but threads, millions of them, billions, stretching in every direction, woven into patterns of such complexity and beauty that my mind could not hold them. I saw the pattern, not the idea of it, not the philosophy of it, but the actual thing, the living, breathing, turning thing. Every life, a thread, every choice a knot, every death a severed end, and every birth a new thread fed into the loom. and I saw the White Tower, not as it was becoming. I saw the cracks. I saw the fractures spreading through the stone like veins of black ice. I saw sisters turning against sisters, Ajah against Ajah, the hall of the tower splintering into factions and recriminations. I saw Shuan Sanchi, the Amyrlin, dragged from her throne, stilled, broken, cast out like a spent tool. I saw a new Amyrlin seated in her place, a puppet with a painted smile, and behind her, in the shadows, I saw the black Ajah moving, weaving, pulling threads that led down into a darkness so profound it had no bottom. I saw the tower fall, not to the shadow, to itself, and I woke weeping. I told Amys what I had seen. She listened. She did not interrupt. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, her pale eyes fixed on some middle distance, and then she said very quietly, "The dream shows what is, and what may be. It does not show what must be. The future is not written, child. It is woven, and the weaving can be changed if the weaver is brave enough to reach into the loom." I reached into the loom, night after night. I walked Tel'aran'rhiod. I walked the corridors of the White Tower in the unseen world, and I watched the sisters who walked them in the waking world. I watched their faces. I listened to their words. I saw the black Ajah meeting in chambers that did not exist in the physical tower. Chambers that existed only in the dream, accessible only to those who knew how to look. I saw their rituals. I heard their oaths, sworn to the great Lord of the Dark in words that made my skin crawl and my spirit recoil. I gathered their names, and one by one, patiently, silently, as a spider gathers flies in its web. And I learned not just to see, but to move, to shift from one reflection to another, from one possibility to the next, to walk between the worlds, between the dream and the waking, between the present and the future, to carry messages across distances that would take a horse a fortnight to cross, to stand beside someone in Tel'aran'rhiod and speak to them, even as their bodies slept 1,000 leagues away. The wise ones taught me this, and they taught me something else, something the White Tower never could. They taught me that power is not domination, that strength is not control, that the greatest weaver is not the one who forces the thread into the shape she desires, but the one who listens to the thread, who feels its tension, its direction, its purpose, and who works with it rather than against it. "You, Aes Sedai," Sorelea said to me once, her ancient face creased with something that might have been pity. "You believe that because you can channel the one power, you understand the nature of power. You do not. You understand force. You understand the shaping of energy into form. But power, true power, is the power to yield, to bend without breaking, to flow without losing shape, to hold the whole world in your hands and still keep your fingers open." I carried those words with me. I carry them still. In Tel'aran'rhiod, I was no longer a novice, no longer an accepted, no longer a girl from the 2 rivers, overwhelmed by the vastness of the White Tower. In Tel'aran'rhiod, I was equal to the wise ones, equal to the dream. I walked among the reflections of the world with a certainty and a clarity that I could not find in the waking hours, and I began to understand that this was where I was meant to be. Not in the halls of the tower, bound by rules and rituals and the slow grinding weight of tradition, but here, in the space between, where the pattern was visible, where the threads could be seen and touched and, if one was very careful, very brave, very willing, redirected. I saw the future there, not always clearly, not always completely, but enough. I saw the tower split. I saw the Amyrlin deposed. I saw the nations turn against one another while the shadow gathered strength. I saw Rand walking toward a destiny that would either save the world or destroy it. And I saw that no one, not the tower, not the nations, not even the Aes Sedai themselves, would be able to stop him or guide him or hold him. And I saw myself standing at the center of it all, not beside him, not behind him, but at the center, holding the threads that he could not hold. weaving the pattern that he could not weave. I did not want it. Light helped me. I did not want it. But the dream does not ask what you want. The dream shows you what is. And what is not always what you desire. I walked out of Tel'aran'rhiod that last night in the Isle Waste, and the stars were cold and clear above me, and the desert wind carried the scent of dry earth and distant rain. Amys was waiting for me, her copper hair stirring in the breeze, her expression unreadable. "You are ready," she said. "Ready for what?" She smiled. It was not a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who has seen the shape of the future and knows that the road ahead is paved with thorns. "Ready for the world to need you," she said, "and for you to answer." I did not know then what that would cost. I did not know the weight of the serpent and the staff. I did not know the loneliness of the Amyrlin's throne. I did not know the blood, the betrayal, the impossible choices that would be laid before me like blades on a table. I only knew that the thread was taut, that the loom was waiting, and that I could not look away. The wheel turns. The wheel weaves, and in the dreaming, I had seen my place in the pattern. Not at the edge, not in the shadows, at the center. They chose me because they thought I was small. Let me say that plainly, without bitterness, without pride, without any of the ornaments that history might one day drape over the truth. They chose me because I was 18 years old, because I was not yet full Aes Sedai, because I had no faction, no power base, no army of loyal sisters at my back. They chose me because they believed I would be grateful, obedient, malleable, a figurehead to rally the rebel Ajahs, a name to stamp on their proclamations, a child to seat upon the serpent's throne while they whispered the true commands from behind the curtain. The blue Ajah wanted a weapon against Elaida. The green wanted a general for Tarmon Gai'don. The yellow wanted a healer who would not interfere in their affairs. The brown wanted a scholar who would fund their researches. Each faction looked at me and saw what they wished to see. A mirror, a tool, a girl who would say yes. They were wrong, but I let them believe they were right. That was the first lesson Tel'aran'rhiod taught me. The lesson the White Tower never could. You do not fight the current. You float. You let the river carry you where it will, and you wait, patient and still, for the moment when the current bends. And then you steer. Saladar, a village on the border of Altara, chosen for its insignificance. No lord to question us. No garrison to oppose us. Just a cluster of stone buildings, a muddy river, and 600 sisters and novices and accepted, huddled together like refugees, pretending they were not rebels, pretending they were not traitors to the tower they had sworn to serve. The day they raised me to the Amyrlin's seat, I wore a dress of blue silk that did not fit properly. It had been hastily altered, taken in at the waist, let out at the shoulders. I remember the pins biting into my skin. I remember the weight of the stole they draped around my neck, the 7-colored stole of the Amyrlin, heavier than any garment I had ever worn. I remember the faces of the hall of the tower, assembled in a bare stone hall with no throne, no dais, no grandeur. Just women staring at me, waiting to see what I would do. I knelt. I spoke the oaths. I let them place the serpent and the staff in my hands. And I smiled, and I said thank you. And I let them believe they had won. The first month was a lesson in humiliation. They brought me decisions already made. They presented me with edicts already written. They asked my opinion and then overruled it gently, with the patient condescension of elders addressing a child who has spoken out of turn. I was to sign. I was to smile. I was to be seen and not heard. I signed. I smiled. I was seen. And at night, I walked Tel'aran'rhiod. I walked the corridors of Elaida's White Tower. I sat in the hall of the tower and listened to the loyalists argue. I watched the black Ajah move through the shadows of Valon, weaving their quiet poison. I gathered names. I gathered secrets. I gathered the threads of every conspiracy, every betrayal, every whispered alliance, and I held them in my hands like a weaver holds her shuttle. And in the waking world, I began to pull. It was small at first, a question asked in the right moment, A name mentioned in passing. A name that made a sister pale and look away. A suggestion, framed not as a command, but as a curiosity. I wonder, I would say, tilting my head, letting my voice carry just the faintest edge of innocence. I wonder why Sister So-and-so was seen leaving the Yellow Quarters at midnight. I wonder what she was discussing. I wonder if it concerned the hall. Small questions, small knives, but they cut. The factions began to fracture. The blue and the green, who had been united in their opposition to Eliada, found themselves at odds over strategy. The yellow and the brown, who had wanted only to be left alone, found themselves drawn into the conflict despite their wishes. And through it all, I sat at the center of the web, and I listened, and I waited, and I pulled. The turning point came in the 3rd month. Sheriam, my keeper of the chronicles, a blue sister of considerable ambition, brought me a letter she wished me to send to the rulers of the borderlands. A letter requesting military aid. A letter that would commit the rebel tower to a war. It was not ready to fight. I read it. I looked at her, and I said no. The silence in the room was absolute. You cannot say no, Sheriam said. Her voice was careful, measured, but I heard the steel beneath it. You are the Amyrlin, but the Hall advises, and the Hall has decided. The Hall has not decided, I said. The Hall has suggested, and I have declined. You do not have the authority. I have all the authority. I set the letter down. I did not raise my voice. I did not need to. I am the Amyrlin seat. I sit the serpent's throne. I speak for the White Tower, and I say that we do not send this letter. Not yet. Not until we have something more to offer than promises and desperation. Sheriam stared at me. The other sisters in the room stared at me, and in their eyes I saw it, the shift. The moment when the puppet strings went slack, and the puppet stood on its own feet, and the puppeteers realized, too late, that the thing they had built was no longer theirs. After that, the change was slow, but it was absolute. I took the hall in hand, not with force, not with threats, with patience, with knowledge, with the quiet, relentless application of truth, where they expected evasion, and silence where they expected compliance. I learned their names, their fears, their ambitions, their secrets. I walked their dreams and saw what they hid from themselves, and I used it. Not cruelly, not vindictively, but firmly. The way a hand closes around a blade, not to cut, but to hold. And then there was Rand. He came to me in the 4th month, not in the flesh. In Tel'aran'rhiod, I was walking the reflection of Caemon, studying the political currents of Andor, when I felt him, a presence, vast and burning and barely contained, like a star forced into the shape of a man. Egwene, his voice, changed, deepened, worn thin by the weight of what he carried. But his voice, the boy from Emond's field, the boy who had held my hand at the ferry and watched me go. Rand, I said. We stood in the dream, facing each other across a distance that was no distance at all. He was taller than I remembered, leaner. His eyes held a light that was not the light, a fire that was not Saidin. The taint was gone, cleansed, but the scars of it remained. The knowledge of what he had been, what he had done, what he would yet have to do. You are Amyrlin, he said. Not a question, a wonder, a grief. I am Egwene Alver, from Emond's field, Amyrlin's seat, of the White Tower. He laughed, and the sound was broken, and beautiful, and unbearably sad. The wheel weaves strange patterns. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, I said. The old words. The words Nynaeve used to say, and my father, and the wisdom before her. But they tasted different now. They tasted like iron. We spoke for an hour. Of the war, of the shadow. Of the shadow, of the last battle, which was no longer a prophecy but a certainty, gathering on the horizon like a storm. He told me what he needed from me, not obedience, not alliance, something harder, Something more terrible. I need you to hold the tower, he said. When I go to Sheol Ghul, when I face the Dark One, I need the tower whole. I need the sisters fighting, not squabbling. I need you to be what they will not be. I need you to be the Amyrlin. I am the Amyrlin, I said. Not yet, he said, and his eyes, those terrible, burning, beautiful eyes, looked at me with something that might have been love, or might have been mourning, or might have been both. But you will be. Before the end, you will be. He vanished. He vanished. The dream closed around the space where he had been, and I stood alone in the reflection of Camelin, with the taste of his sorrow on my lips and the weight of his trust pressing down on my shoulders like a physical thing. The march on Tar Valon came after, the siege. The long, grinding, terrible months of waiting, of negotiating, of holding 600 women together through sheer force of will while the city starved and the loyalists fractured from within. I do not wish to speak of it in detail. There is no poetry in a siege. No grandeur, only hunger and cold and the slow attrition of hope. But I held the sisters together. I held the alliance together. I held the dream together. And when the gates of Tar Valon finally opened, when the loyalist sisters walked out with their hands empty and their eyes downcast, when Elida was dragged from the serpent's throne in chains of her own making, I walked into the White Tower, not as a conqueror, but as a healer. I did not gloat. I did not punish. I sat the serpent's throne, the true throne, in the true hall of the tower, and I looked out at the assembled sisters, blue and red and green and yellow and brown and white and gray, all of them, whole, broken, bleeding, but whole. And I said, we are the White Tower. We have always been the White Tower, and we will be the White Tower, or we will be nothing. The Black Ajah was purged in the weeks that followed. I had their names. I had carried them in my memory for months, gathered from the dream, verified, cross-referenced, confirmed. One by one, they were called before the hall. One by one, they were judged. Some fled, some fought, some wept and begged and swore they had been deceived. I showed them no mercy. I could not afford it. Mercy in that moment would have been a crack in the foundation, and the foundation could not bear another crack. When it was done, when the last shadow was dragged into the light and dealt with, I stood alone in the hall of the tower, in the silence, in the vast and echoing quiet of a place that had been at war with itself for longer than I had been alive. And I wept, not for the Black Ajah, not for Elida, not for the sisters who had fallen in the siege, or the ones who had been stilled, or the ones who would never come home. I wept for the girl from Emond's field, the girl who had scrubbed floors in Novice white, the girl who had walked through 3 arches and come out the other side believing she understood the world, the girl who had stood at the edge of the Winespring water and dreamed of something larger than the life she had been given. She was gone. I had cut her loose, thread by thread, year by year, choice by choice, until there was nothing left but the Amyrlin. Nothing left but the serpent and the staff. Nothing left but the pattern and the duty and the terrible, grinding, endless weight of being the one who holds the world together while it tries to tear itself apart. But I did not regret it. I could not afford to. The wheel turns, the wheel weaves, and the thread that was Egwene Alvir, daughter of Bran, apprentice to the wisdom, girl from the 2 rivers, had been woven into a shape she could never have imagined. Not a small shape, not a quiet shape, not the shape of a life lived safely within sight of the Winespring water. A vast shape, a terrible shape, a shape that would hold for a little while longer and then be cut free. But not yet, not yet. There was still a war to fight, still a world to save, still a boy from Emond's field, burning with the light, walking toward a destiny that would break him or make him, and I would be there, at the center, holding the threads, weaving the pattern, until the last thread was spun. The sky broke open at dawn, not the gentle breaking of a sun cresting the hills of the 2 rivers, not the slow unfurling of light over the Winespring water, patient and golden and kind. This was a wound, a tearing. The heavens split along a seam that should never have been visible, and through the wound poured a darkness that was not the absence of light, but the presence of something else, something ancient and formless and hungry, pressing against the fabric of the world with fingers made of shadow and malice. Tarmon Gai'don, the last battle, the end of all things, or the beginning of all things, or the place where ending and beginning became the same word spoken in two different voices. I stood upon the slopes above the field, the serpent and the staff heavy in my hands, the seven-colored stole whipped by a wind that carried the smell of ash and iron and the sweet, sick rot of Trolloc blood. Behind me, the White Tower marched, all of it, whole. Every Ajah, every sister, every novice who could hold a weave without shaking. Blue and red and green and yellow and brown and white and gray, side by side, shoulder to shoulder, their differences burned away by the fire of necessity. I had done that. I had held them together. I had forged them in the crucible of my own will, my own patience, my own stubborn, burning refusal to let the tower fall. And now they marched as one, and the ground trembled beneath their feet, and the air crackled with the gathered fury of 600 women who could channel the one power. And I looked upon them, and I felt, for one brief and perfect moment, that it had been worth it, all of it, every scar, every sleepless night, every compromise that tasted like ash. Every friend I had lost and every enemy I had made and every piece of myself I had fed to the pattern, thread by thread, until there was nothing left but the duty and the fire. It had been worth it. And then the shadows struck. They came in waves. Trollocs first. A tide of horned and clawed bodies howling, crashing against our lines like a sea against a seawall. Myrddraal among them, eyeless and terrible, their black cloaks stirring in a wind that touched nothing else, and behind them, the Forsaken, the chosen of the Dark One. Men and women who had walked the world since the age of legends, who carried the one power like a weapon of annihilation, who wove death as casually as a weaver throws a shuttle. I raised my hand. I wove. Sedai flooded into me, sweet and vast and burning, and I shaped it into fire, into lightning, into walls of force that shattered the first wave of Trollocs and sent their broken bodies tumbling back down the slope. I wove and I wove and I wove, and beside me the sisters wove with me, a symphony of destruction, a chorus of light hurled against the dark. And it was not enough. It was never going to be enough. I knew that. I had known it in Tel'aran'rhiod, in the shifting sands of the unseen world, where I had seen this moment from 1,000 angles, and in every one of them, the thread of my life ran to its end. Not in old age, not in peace. Not in the quiet arms of a husband in a small house by the Winespring water. Here, now, on this field, in this fire, in this terrible and beautiful and necessary moment, Gai'don was beside me. His sword flashed in the unnatural light, cutting down Trollocs that pressed too close, his face a mask of blood and fury. He shouted something at me, a warning, a plea. I could not hear him over the roar of the battle, over the screaming of the dying, over the vast and grinding sound of the world being torn apart at its seams. I reached for him, not with Sedai, with my hand. My bare hand, ungloved, trembling. I touched his arm, just once, just for a moment. He turned. His eyes met mine, and in his eyes I saw it. He knew. He had always known. He had sworn himself to me body and soul, as my warder, my protector, my love. And he had known from the first day that this was how it would end. Not with him saving me, but with him watching me go. I smiled at him. I hope it was enough. I hope he understood. And then the blow came. I did not see it. I felt it. A lance of darkness, woven from Sedin, twisted by the Dark One's hand, striking through the chaos of the battle, threading between the weaves of a dozen sisters, finding the single gap in my defenses, the single moment when my attention was turned elsewhere. It struck me in the chest, just below the heart, and it was cold, so cold, colder than the fever of my first touch of Sedai, colder than the arches, colder than the night I left Emond's field. I fell. The world tilted, the sky spun. The sounds of battle became distant, muffled, as though I were sinking beneath the surface of a deep and still lake. I felt the ground against my cheek, cold stone, cold earth. The taste of blood in my mouth, copper and salt. The same taste I had known 100 times in 100 small wounds. But this time, it did not stop. This time, it kept coming. Gai'don was over me, his hands on my chest pressing, trying to staunch the flow, trying to weave a healing that I could feel him reaching for with desperate, clumsy fingers. His face above me white, shattered, his mouth moving, saying my name, saying it over and over, as though the sound of it could hold me here, could anchor me to the world, could prevent the thread from snapping. Egwene, look at me. Stay with me, please. I wanted to. Light help me. I wanted to see the dawn. I wanted to see Rand's face when it was over. I wanted to walk back into the 2 rivers and stand by the Winespring water and feel the mud between my toes and hear the wind in the trees and be, for one more day, the girl I had been before the world claimed me. But the thread was pulling free. I could feel it. Why, not painfully, not violently, gently. The way a leaf pulls free from a branch in autumn. The way a breath leaves the lungs for the last time. The way a song ends, not with a crash, but with a fading, a softening, a gradual surrender to the silence. I looked at Gai'don. I reached up. I touched his face. His cheek was wet. I could not tell if it was blood or tears. "It is all right," I whispered, and I meant it. "It is all right." The light went out of his eyes, not his life, his hope. The thing that had kept him standing, fighting, believing that he could save me, it went out. And what was left was just a man kneeling in the mud, holding the body of the woman he loved, while the world ended around him. I wanted to tell him it was not an ending. I wanted to tell him what the wise ones had taught me, what Tel'aran'rhiod had shown me, what the wheel had whispered to me in the long, dark hours when I walked the unseen world alone. That death is not a severing, that death is a completion, that the thread does not cease to exist when it is cut from the loom. It becomes part of the pattern. It becomes part of the whole. It becomes eternal. But my tongue would not shape the words, and my eyes were closing, and the world was growing very small, and very quiet, and very far away. And then it was not. The battle was gone. The pain was gone. The weight of the serpent and the staff, the weight of the tower, the weight of every choice and every sacrifice and every sleepless night, all of it. Gone, lifted, released, like a breath held too long, finally exhaled, and I saw the pattern. Not as I had seen it in Tel'aran'rhiod, fragmented, shifting, partial. I saw it whole, vast, beyond vast, infinite, beyond infinite. Every thread, every life, every moment of joy and sorrow and love and loss, woven together into a tapestry so complex, so beautiful, so achingly perfect, that my mind could not hold it and did not need to. I simply was in it, a part of it, a single thread, blue and gold, woven into the center of the whole. I saw Rand, burning with the light, standing at the heart of the storm, facing the Dark One with nothing but his own stubborn, broken, magnificent will. And I saw him win, not because he was strong, not because he was chosen, but because he was willing to break, willing to burn, willing to be unmade so that the world could be remade. I saw the tower standing, the sisters fighting, bleeding, dying, but standing, holding the line, holding the light. I saw Elaine, golden and fierce, wielding the one power like a queen wielding a scepter. I saw Nynaeve, wild-haired and furious, healing the wounded with hands that shook and eyes that burned. I saw Matt laughing and cursing, leading a charge against a column of Trollocs with a bloody spear in his hand. I saw Perrin, silent and steady, his hammer falling like thunder, his golden eyes reflecting a light that was not the sun. I saw them all, my friends, my family, the children of Emond's field, scattered across the world, woven into the pattern in ways none of us could have imagined. And I saw the girl, standing at the edge of the Winespring water, barefoot, 17, looking south, toward the horizon, toward the places where the roads went on and on, feeling the pull, feeling the thread, feeling the vast and terrifying and beautiful pull of a life larger than the one she had been given. She looked up, she looked at me, and she smiled, and I smiled back. The wheel turns, the wheel turns, the wheel weaves. There are no endings, not truly, not in the way the world understands endings. There are only turnings, only changes, only the thread, released from one shape and gathered into another, only the pattern, growing, shifting, becoming. I am Egwene Al'Vir, daughter of Bran, daughter of the two rivers, Novice, accepted, Aes Sedai, Dreamwalker, Amyrlin's seat, mistress of the White Tower. I was afraid. I was brave. I was small, and I was vast, and I was enough. The thread is woven, the pattern holds. The world will turn and turn and turn, and my name will be spoken, or it will be forgotten. And it does not matter. It was never about the name. It was never about the throne, or the power, or the legacy. It was about the choice. The single, simple, terrible, beautiful choice to step onto the ferry and not look back, to reach for the one power and let it burn, to sit the serpent's throne and hold the world together with bleeding hands, to fall and to let go, and to trust that the pattern would catch me. And it did. Listen, can you hear it? Not the horns, not the weeping, not the slow grinding sound of the wheel turning another age into being. The water, the Winespring water, murmuring over the stones, patient, endless, telling the same story it has told since the world was young. There are no endings. The wheel weaves as the wheel wills, but I chose the pattern, and I would choose it again